Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Cara Ryan? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Cara Elaine Ryan was born on October 1, 1969, and lived in the Clearwater, Florida area. In 2009, she found a job at a high school as a journalism teacher. In the early 1990s, a man named John Joseph Rush visited her class to help students with a project. He had been born on February 4, 1970. John was a sergeant in the St. Petersburg Police Department. During the class project, Cara and John realized that they had met years earlier. The couple became romantically involved. They married in 1996 and lived in an apartment not far from Clearwater on Indian Rocks Beach. Sometime around 2004, Cara had an affair with the principal at her school, which gives new meaning to the phrase, doing something based on principle. Her extracurricular activity was bad news for her marriage. Cara and John separated. This same year, 2004, John was involved in a collision in his police cruiser and was injured. He was no longer physically able to be a patrol officer and retired in 2005. John found a job as an investigator for the medical examiner. The divorce of Cara and John finalized in 2006. In 2007, they happened to run into each other on the beach. 2 days later, John showed up at Cara's apartment and asked if they could get back together. The couple reconciled. They called each other husband and wife and wore wedding rings, but they did not remarry. The relationship appeared to have a tumultuous nature to it. At some point, Cara took over all of the couple's finances. Allegedly, this was prompted because John struggled with both gambling and substance use. John's pension and his earnings from his job with the medical examiner went directly into a bank account controlled by Cara. He had to show her receipts for all his purchases. Sometime in early 2015, John found another lover. She was also a law enforcement officer. On February 13, John took control of his finances and established his own bank account. His money was now being directed to an account that Cara did not control. 2 days later, on February 15, he moved out of Cara's residence and moved in with his lover. John explained the failure of his relationship with Cara by telling her that he needed to find himself. It did not take long for Cara to find a new lover. His name was Scott, and he worked as a correctional officer. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On March 7, 2015, at about 10:05 p.m., Cara sent an adults-only image to Scott, along with a message inviting him over to her apartment for sex. Scott was working and did not immediately respond. Cara then sent a text message to John inviting him to come over for sex and sent him the same image she had sent to Scott. Even though John was in a new relationship, he decided to take Cara up on her offer. What happened after this is a bit of a mystery. At about 10:17 p.m., Cara called 911 and said that she had been the victim of an assault of a sexual nature and had shot her ex-husband, John. A neighbor of Cara also called the police and reported a man on his porch bleeding and unconscious. The injured man was John Rush. When the police arrived, they handcuffed Cara and put her in the back of a cruiser. First responders attended to John, but he died as a result of a single gunshot wound. He had been shot with a .38 caliber revolver that he had given to Cara. Here is the story that Cara told the police at the scene. John came over to her house for sex. While they were in bed, Scott tried to contact Cara several times on her cell phone. Presumably, he did this because she initially reached out to him. John grabbed the phone and became furious when he realized that there was another man trying to communicate with Cara. John attacked her. She retrieved her .38 caliber revolver from a nightstand, pointed it at John, closed her eyes, and pulled the trigger. John was standing over her on the bed when he was struck by a single bullet. As a side note, closing one's eyes is not the best strategy for hitting one's target, mostly because of the not aiming part. After sitting for 3 hours in the police cruiser, officers finally took Cara to be medically evaluated. She had bruises on her wrists and some bruising on one of her hips. After she was evaluated, the police transported Cara to the police station for an interview. At this point, she offered a second version of her story. Cara said that John attacked her and left the apartment. She called him several times and said that she wasn't serious about Scott. John returned to Cara's apartment, made entry, and then threatened her as he stood in the doorway of her bedroom. He reached out with his hand to grab her. At this point, Cara fired a single shot at him. She knew that it was John she fired on. She recognized him before firing the fatal shot. Cara told a counselor a third version of her story. She claimed that John grabbed her and the gun went off. This makes the shooting seem accidental. Cara came up with a fourth version of her story, saying that she did not know the identity of the attacker when she fired. John didn't say anything to her as he approached her in the bedroom, so she didn't realize that John was the person who she shot when she pulled the trigger. She only recognized him after hearing him say something when he was struck by the bullet. There were some other inconsistencies across various versions of Cara's story, like whether the door to her apartment was locked or not. The police believe that Cara offered 10 different versions of her story in total, but 4 of them represented distinct versions. 6 days after the shooting, on March 13, 2015, Cara Ryan was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. She went to trial in January 2017. On January 27 of that year, Cara Ryan was found not guilty after the jury deliberated for only 90 minutes. Cara faced a lawsuit from John's daughter. This case would later settle. As part of this agreement, both Cara and John's daughter agreed that Cara's actions were in no way intentional or illegal. Now moving to my analysis. Cara Ryan has always maintained her innocence. She claimed that she fired at John in self-defense. The state obviously disagreed. They believed that Cara murdered her ex-husband because he left her. This brings me to the question, was Cara Ryan guilty of murdering her ex-husband, John Rush? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that Cara was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. About 3 weeks before the shooting, John changed his financial accounts so that Cara could no longer access his money, and he moved out of her apartment. The day before John moved out, he told a neighbor that he was worried that Cara was going to shoot him. Cara appeared to be desperate to get John back. For example, she had notes in her phone like, quote, "I would do anything to make it work, I love you, and I want to start over," unquote, and, quote, "How can you just abandon a 20-year relationship," unquote. On the night of the shooting, Cara appeared to be looking for sex from her lover Scott. Cara knew, or should have known, that Scott was unavailable due to work. She decided to invite John to her apartment instead, even though they had broken up. John did not initiate this contact. This was Cara's idea. Conveniently, John just happened to see that Cara's phone was receiving calls or messages from Scott. Why did Cara leave her phone in a location and condition where John could detect its activity? It's almost like she was setting him up to find out about Scott. Maybe she wanted John to be jealous. There is no doubt that Cara used her revolver to kill John. The bullet struck John in his upper left arm and continued down into his heart. He was shot from the side. This is not consistent with his hand reaching toward Cara. Perhaps John was turning away to escape her when she fired at him. After the shooting, Cara offered 4 distinct versions of her story to various people. Did John come back to the apartment or not? Did Cara recognize John before shooting him or not? Were the lights on or off when she fired? She said they were off, but first responders claimed that many lights in the apartment were activated. Cara introduced many inconsistencies with these multiple versions. Cara claimed that John severely struggled with both gambling and substance use issues, but people who knew John denied that claim. Cara had marks on her wrists. However, there is an explanation that did not involve her being attacked. She was in the back of the police cruiser for a long time with her cell phone. The police never took it away from her. She used her phone while in handcuffs, which could have caused the marks. A psychotherapist who treated John suggested that John was in a downward spiral, but John's new girlfriend said that he was not. Cara appeared to be quite calm and detached after shooting John. Moving to the exculpatory factors, on the night of the shooting, Cara told the story about being assaulted by John from the beginning of her contact with law enforcement. As far as the multiple versions of her story, Cara argued that she simply had the sequence of events confused. According to Cara, John was a compulsive gambler. After being injured in the vehicle collision, he started excessively consuming alcohol and oxycodone. She also claimed that he had symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder from his job with the medical examiner. John had alcohol in his system when he died and had one oxycodone pill in his pocket. He may have been experiencing withdrawal symptoms from not taking oxycodone. The day before the shooting, John went to a psychotherapist who said that John was spiraling out of control. The psychotherapist believed that John deliberately made entry into Cara's house, knowing that she would kill him. That theory is impossible to believe, but it shows how certain the psychotherapist was that John was in a destructive place as far as his mood. The marks on Cara's wrists appear to be fresh and are consistent with her story of being grabbed by John. Considering how John was a member of law enforcement, it stands to reason that the police were biased against Cara. They wanted to find a way to make her look guilty. As far as Cara being calm and detached, people react differently to traumatic events. When considering all the evidence, do I think that Cara was guilty of murder? In my opinion, she probably was guilty in reality. However, I believe that she was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I think the jury made the right decision, but probably for the wrong reason. 2 of the jury members were interviewed after the verdict. They were impressed that Cara was a teacher and believed that trauma could explain the multiple versions of the story that Cara offered. The members of the jury trapped themselves by only contemplating 2 possibilities in this case. They believed that Cara must have either acted in self-defense or out of rage. This leaves many other possible feelings and motives, like vindictiveness, hate, revenge, fear of abandonment, or greed. Here's what I think happened in this case. This is just a theory, my opinion. Cara wanted to get John back into her life and was becoming increasingly desperate. She invited him over to her apartment so that he would discover her relationship with Scott and become jealous. She made sure that John would look at her phone, or maybe she simply told him about Scott. Her plan wasn't to kill John, but rather to get him back under her control. Something did not go as planned. From this point, there are 2 possibilities. Cara killed John to get revenge and lied about being attacked, or John became angrier than Cara expected. He threatened her or physically attacked her, and she killed him in self-defense. Either way, Cara created the situation that led to John's death. Under the revenge theory, she committed murder, but under the angry reaction theory, she technically acted in self-defense. The problem here is that there is no way to know which theory is true. I think that Cara was extremely fortunate to be found not guilty at her trial. Now moving to my final thoughts. On-again, off-again relationships are a reality for many people, but it's important to figure out why a relationship is tumultuous prior to a reconciliation. People in these relationships reunite without understanding what went wrong in the past and what they should change to make the relationship work in the future. They just keep falling into the same trap. They confuse the excitement and pleasure of sexual behavior with commitment and sensitivity. In some instances, this is a fatal mistake. Those are my thoughts on the case of Cara Ryan. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.